Hello, my name is Karinne Bessette. I am a technologist with Veeam Software. I am also a Microsoft certified trainer, and I side teach CompTIA certifications, Linux certifications, pretty much any certification that involves around technology is something that I get involved with because I have a huge passion for those kinds of things. This presentation actually started from one of the certifications that I took from Microsoft, which I believe is the SC300, and it's still sort of around in some sort of form, but it's actually a security certification path from the Microsoft side. It's above the 900, but it's still a very broad topic across the board. Here are things you should be looking at. Then I've been reiterating this same session based off of updates for about the last 6 years. This is a little about me. The QR code on this screen will actually take you to a link tree. This link tree contains the PowerPoint presentation you are about to see, as well as recorded demos that you will see, and bullet points from this entire presentation with notes. If you don't grab it now, I will have another copy of this at the end of the presentation. Whenever I come into any type of community event, I like to also call out some of the softer skill things that I do in my life. I'm huge into rock climbing. I've been rock climbing since before COVID. I have 3 lovely fur babies. During COVID, they were the star on all of my presentations. In fact, they got more good reviews a lot of times than I did for the content itself. And I also enjoy gaming and food across communities. Anytime I'm in an area and you have a #1 food place that I have to try before I leave, feel free to approach me at the end of the session, even if you don't have any questions, and let me know where I can go get some good food. Now, whenever I see a presentation from someone, one of the questions I get are, I want to ask them about the tools they're using, the recording that they're using. Well, it kind of feels awkward when their content's about something else. These are the majority of the tools that I use, so I want to give them back out to you guys. So this is also on the entire link tree and links to all these different tools, including some of the ones you might be familiar with and ones you may not be familiar with. My very first security presentation all time that I was asked to come to, I wasn't like prescribed to go do a presentation. I was going to do it to an ISACA event. And I get to walk into this room of a very much demographic of a lot of men, a lot of people that I have to convince to listen to the girl with leggings and rainbow hair and being like, hey, I know what I'm talking about, or something impactful. So I like numbers. And I'm thinking, what number would every single person in this room like? And I couldn't think of anything, so I Googled how to make money doing cybercrime. There are over 1.7 billion results just on how to make money doing cybercrime. I now give the statistic to my students, and there's one of 2 reactions that happen from them. First of all, it's horrific, and they're like, how is this possible? And the other side is kind of like the gears are turning, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna see you on the news later. So there's 2 aspects to that. Now, if you're not already following, there is this blog that goes through, and it's sort of like the white, gray, and black hat side of hacking and security. They posted something recently about OneDrive enumeration. Who knew that you can enumerate your OneDrive accounts, URLs, without having to log in? Anyone? You can use this script based off of the company's known code and a rainbow table list of generic people's names, like top names you might find. It'll run through, and based off the return that it gets from this script, you'll know the exact username to start trying to attack that organization without needing to know any insider information about that organization at all. This is kind of controversial, because you have to be able to reach those URLs to begin with. How do you get past those URLs? With some type of authentication. But this is a piece of information that's now out there from your company that you may have and used for any type of attack. This right here is more of an example piece of you're going to get attacked at some point in time, and if you think you're completely secure and your users are never going to have their username and password on anything, well, you can have it happen just about anywhere. And it really comes from the different types of threats. You have all of the things you hear about the 0 days, the 0-day patches, and what most IT people seem to understand at this point, but unfortunately not a lot of organizations understand. 0-day doesn't mean that that's when that was discovered. That means that's when that was published publicly for you to then go patch or may not patch depending if they have a patch available. Meaning it's been an open door inside of your environment for that period of time. And then we have global and remote workers. We think about these buildings that we work in as a corporation. These buildings have the enterprise grade firewalls and VPN connectors and IT staff on site making sure no types of intrusions happen. Then we went to work from home, and now we got our ISP routers in a majority of our homes with absolutely no firewall in between them and the outside world. Their kids are playing Minecraft on their machines. It's a horrible thing to try to lock down now, but it's a bigger picture in the sense. Then lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge and employees and needing to train those users properly are always going to be something, because I can tell you it doesn't matter what generation you're from, there is someone from every generation that doesn't know how to turn on a computer or a difference between your monitor and a computer, because if we did, we'd be living in a much different world. Then excess of privilege. There are tons of presentations out there, and if you want some more information on this, you can come up to me after, but no one needs to be an administrator on a machine, period. There's a way to get any type of access you need already initiated for the granular access that you need without being an administrator, and we've kind of given this administrator access out to everyone because we don't want the overhead in IT, like, I want to install this thing or I want to install that thing, and it leaves a wide open door. And the problem with being a local administrator as the main user on the computer goes beyond this. Because if that account, that local system account gets compromised, you've then created a backdoor into your organization. And excess of privilege has a backdoor into your Microsoft 365 side. And that really comes down to your security planning. Security planning is not a straight, narrow path, because users do not like change. They do not like extra things to be able to do their job. I can tell you that I have firsthand seen organizations use the button inside of Microsoft 365 to let absolutely no one have access to OneDrive or SharePoint that's outside the organization. Do you want to know what happened? There was a significant increase in Dropbox accounts that were created by our sales representatives because they needed to get these PowerPoints and these videos out to these clients, and they're not going to lose money on deals just because they can't share a OneDrive link anymore. So you didn't consider the users themselves, and you created a backdoor into your organization by creating this kind of change without considering them. And I have a whole thing on change management policies there. But we're really like playing bingo. Which policy do we follow? Which one do we go with? And really the answer is, unless you have a regulation, pick one. Once you've picked one, you can start to dive into the more intricate pieces of, I'm going to be more secure today than I was yesterday. As long as you're more secure today than you were yesterday, you're making progress. Also consider things like, what else is happening in our organization? Are we about to have a major software push? Is Christmas coming up, or the July timeframe when people are about to go on leave and they're going to come back and not understand anything for logging into their machines? Might not be the optimal times and places to do those types of updates or changes, because no one's going to be reading their emails, no one's really doing that training actively. So be mindful of that. And always keep in the CIA, because you can have all the confidentiality, all of the integrity in the entire world, but if you lose availability, you're done. Nothing can surpass availability for your end users to be able to do their jobs. Now, there's a whole bunch more numbers in here, and it really comes down to people, process, and technology. People are always going to be your entity. You're going to have to train your employees. You're going to have to give them different things that they're going to need to do to gain access where they originally could just like log in willy-nilly and pretty much create a backdoor. You're going to have to understand the different types of technology. Now, just a question here, who here is a Microsoft only shop and has absolutely no other cloud in their infrastructure? No one? Oh, got like one. See, this number is dwindling, and I can tell you because I manage our AWS, GCP, Azure, and Microsoft 365 permissions for my team in my organization, and none of them are the same. None of the ways you retain data, none of the ways that you set up labels, and yes, you can try to pay for an additional tool that kind of pushes them all together to try to make similar policies out to all of these entities. But in the end, you're going to have an expert that knows certain settings involved in this are necessary. I work with Microsoft all the time. About every other time I do this demonstration, and I do the same presentation in its iterations probably 25, 30 times a year. Every time I log in, even if I tested my demo right before I got on stage, there is a possibility one of those portals are going to change, that setting's not going to be there, and something's not going to work. And that's just one of those cloud entities that we're working with. All of these come down to, we want to make sure we're not breaking compliance. If you aren't already aware, if you do get hit by a ransomware attack, you may be liable and sanctioned by the government if you do pay any type of ransom, so be very cautious of that. That was posted out in 2020. And license. Who likes Microsoft license? Anyone? Nah, me either. Because we move beyond just having to worry about the E3, E5 license, all of these different P license that, okay, can I use this Enter ID feature? Sort of, but if you get the P1 or P2, you can actually use this feature. But demos fail because a license expired and I have to be in charge of those licenses. But in overarching, when you're looking at it, E1 means you're going to get your browser versions of applications. You pay for E2 because you want desktop software. You want security for your users, you're going to be paying for the E5 license. There's some micro changes between each of those editions, but overall, that's what you're going to find, and you can kind of use that to bridge your gap into Microsoft. If you ever have to have a Microsoft conversation on licensing, I recommend talking to 3 different Microsoft representatives on license, and then cross-compare what they say, because that's going to get you the most accurate answer. Now, this is where I've been talking at you for a while, and I ask you guys to talk back to me. Does every administrator need to be a global administrator in order to do their job? Anyone? Thank you. That is absolutely true. And actually, there's all kinds of administrators. There's over like 25 different administrators inside the console to do micro jobs like adding users, I'm going to do Exchange, I'm going to be a knowledge worker, whatever that might be. You can at least granularly assign those scopes. And then we're going to be applying something called privilege identity management on top of that to lock them down unless they're actually doing that job in their scope. Best practices, no more than 4 global administrator accounts. This includes an administrator account that is your break glass account. A break glass account is the account that you have that is excluded from all the policies. It has monitoring on it that 6 different people get an email if this account is ever logged into. But if you ever lock yourself out of the Microsoft environment, you're able to log into this account to try to recover your instances. This helps you in times that you might be under attack. You lock yourself under conditional access, privileged identity management. Someone leaves the organization. This is what you need. The other thing is, stop having administrative accounts be your everyday user accounts. This means if you log in to check your email on your phone, your laptop, 6 other computers, the McDonald's drive-thru as you're walking through, whatever it might be, that should not be the administrative account that can wipe out your entire organization. If it has to be, I would recommend at least having the privilege identity management and have the other IT guy in the department be your 4 eyes rule, being like, hey, I'm going to add some users when I get back from lunch. I'm going to set it for after lunch. Can you approve it so when I get back I have the access? That way it's not active all the time. Now, are password resets really necessary? Anyone? Yes? No? Do we think those are good things? Arbitrary password resets is a good one. So actually, even according to NIST, arbitrary password resets put your organization at a higher risk factor than if you have a long, complex password that is only reset based off of certain conditional accesses. Now, this means that if you do have a weaker password and someone's like, okay, it's Starbucks 001. Well, just because the attacker didn't get in with 001, they're going to try 002, 003, birth years that might be someone that is known to be a Starbucks frequenter. Either way, you're putting your organization at a higher risk by having arbitrary password resets. Having other forms of authentication methods and locking down your organization is much better. Banned passwords list is something we're going to take a look at. Having necessary lockout thresholds and multi-factor authentication. Now, multi-factor authentication is a big one right now, but not all multi-factor authentication is made the same. You have to be very mindful of what you're allowing your users to use for the multi-factor authentication. Another thing, if you haven't heard of Have I Been Pwned? Has anyone here heard of Have I Been Pwned? It's really cool, right? I actually got to see Torrey Hunt do a live presentation as a keynote, and he's a phenomenal human. This technology can be implemented into your environment to check the hashes of your passwords against the pool of possible compromised hashes out there to then initiate password resets for your end users, rather than just saying, okay, top passwords for 2021, 2022, and 2023, and putting those just into your banned password list. So we'll be checking out authentication methods, and there's a couple different places where the authentication methods and policies are put into place. We'll take a look at that, and the threshold lockout and the password in the environment. And this is where we head back over to the lab, which makes those the prime seats. And we'll head over to the Entra environment. And the first place that we'll do is authentication methods, and we'll give ourselves a little more room here. And the authentication methods you'll see over on the right-hand side is the ability to allow users multi-factor authentication and the physical hard token password factors. I'm recently trying to do some of these with some concepts around like a 4-eyes rule, where you both set up the second form of authentication for certain application groups inside your Entra ID environment, and then you swap key fobs. So you can only then log in to access that privilege level app by being like, hey, can you come over and plug in your key stick so that I can now authenticate to get in for that certain zone. These are some of the things where you want the break glass account just in case you accidentally lock out or lose access to one of those users. Microsoft changes things all the time. I have actually had a demo fail here recently because Microsoft signed the Responsible SaaS Provider Initiative. This Responsible SaaS Provider Initiative says, we're going to secure your environment because we don't think you know how to, because we should be more responsible for the default settings. Well, they put in a conditional access that said, hey, you have to do multi-factor authentication if you have any type of administrative account, period. They turned it on, didn't tell anyone. Even if you could get in with the multi-factor authentication and you go over the conditional access, you still could not exclude users. So it was forced on, and it took them a while to work out the bug in the back end to allow people to exclude certain administrative accounts, which became sort of a problem. Now we have password protection. This has the lockout threshold and the number of times before you get locked out. But what I really want to call out here is the banned password list. The banned password list is something that you make up. You can copy and paste from online repositories of stuff that other people have put in place. What I recommend is making it a little bit more directed towards your company. You should have the name of your company, the name of your development projects, your company's favorite teams. So as you can see, I have Raiders here on the list. My boss is a huge Raiders fan. He immediately needed a password reset after I set this up, but there's no more Raiders on here, and he's very publicly a Raiders fan. I also did a quick search through Google saying what were the top passwords for 2021, 2022. I recall years ago when the Batman movie first came out again and was relit up, Batman 123 was the top password. So be mindful of some of those things, because those might pass with a capital B, man with a 4 for the A, a period, 1, 2, 3, done. But you're insecure. Yep, exactly. Now we have the authentication here. Then we have additional authentication methods throughout this console, which we'll go into. And back one more. Do we have any questions as we're going along?
Is there a limit to how many passwords you can add to that list?
There is, but it's some ridiculous amount. It's 1,000 words. So if you have more than 1,000 words, keep in mind it is kind of smart. It knows capital, lowercase, and it's the common exclamation mark for or replacements and 3 are replacements for those different numbers in your organization.
That should still reference password repositories.
Yeah, and you can update them as they go along. Now there are 2 places for authentication methods. You have the authentication method that you can set up underneath the password policies, and then you also have authentication methods here, which are completely different authentication methods, not to confuse anyone at all. These ones are directly associated with password resets though, and what type of authentication method you can use for password resets. And this is where we're going to talk about what kind of authentication method are you going to allow. Who here can answer a phone call without unlocking their phone? Anyone? Okay, we're in a group of security people, but how many of you have users that allow phone calls to be answered without unlocking their phone? Should be more of you. Regardless, if you are able to see the text message from your home screen, being able to answer a phone call, these are not proper forms of authentication to be able to reset your devices. I recommend application authentication, having forced policies on their phone to have certain credentials or levels of credentials longer, PINs, biorecognition, whatever it might be, to unlock their phone in order to get into the authentication app. Then you're forcing a third factor of authentication for a password reset and a knowledge check. All right. Now, I like phishing. Now, I like talking about phishing in the context of there's different flavors of phishing, meaning the intent behind the attack. We have the traditional phishing attack, where you have some uncle in some other country that might have died and you've suddenly won a bunch of money. That may not be something us that be kind of susceptible to, but some of our end users still fall to that. What we actually have more often today in businesses is something called spear phishing. Spear phishing is where they've gotten some type of information about you. They know what your headers look like. They may know who your boss is in your hierarchy. They may know something specific about you. Whenever someone's doing an attack in your organization, they're not immediately encrypting your environment. They are gathering as much information as possible, creating these nice, pretty packages to say, hey, these people run these versions of software, and this version of software happens to have a backdoor that's not been patched yet, and they sell this out to the highest group of bidders. Those people then come in and attack you. What you don't realize is that's 3 to 6 months later, if not longer. And it could be, hey, I didn't get a whole lot about the applications, but I know exactly what their corporate emails look like. So you're going to now start getting emails that look like they come from corporate entities, and that's why most business attacks are spear phishing attacks. They're not just the run-of-the-mill types of phishing. Then, of course, there's whaling, where they know that person has access to something they want. And whaling isn't just the C-level suite. In fact, whaling is more profitable when you start talking about purchasing and procurement and people that start holding the money. Or the golden account, say one of the IT people or interns in your organization gets compromised in this way. Interns are notorious for not wanting to tell you when they've done something wrong. Well, they are susceptible to those whaling types of attacks. And this is where we get to just-in-time access. We've done a lot of talking, but this is a feature under the privileged identity management in the Microsoft 365 side, which allows you to say, I'm going to challenge someone to then get access to an extra privileged access. In this case, we're going to be using a user that is going to request to be a user administrator because they have no access to admin yet. Then they're going to have another user authenticate this person should have that type of access. And that'll be done through the same portal. We'll get there. And when you first log in, this quick start's actually pretty nice to get started with. You'll see your manage access, which is how you configure the specific settings on each of these roles. The just-in-time access activation, this is going to be where your users go. And you can put this as a hot link inside of an SSO page to make it a little easier for maybe the less technically inclined users that know their portal. They know their portal really well, but they have no idea how to navigate Entra. And Entra gets a little cumbersome after a while. And then you can go through and say, hey, someone requested access, they have requested access for this period of time, do they still need access? And this will automatically know who that person's boss is in the hierarchy and send out an email saying, hey, should your user still have access to add and remove users from the organization and be able to request that? The answer might be no, they moved over to procurement or a whole other part of the organization and that should be revoked from them. We'll start to do the manage access and take a look at some of these roles. And underneath roles, we're going to be doing the user role, but any one of these roles has the same meat underneath of it. So first of all, you can do your assignments here. These are the users that will have the privilege to ask for this access. Then if you ever do any type of the coding or you need to do an audit and say, hey, if I give someone the user access, what does this privilege role actually mean for this user? They can check here and you can tell them exactly what directories and application that user is going to be accessing. The role settings is where we get interesting. The role settings, you can tell them that if they request it, they automatically get access. And this could just be for more of an auditing purpose. They don't have it all the time. And you can tell them, okay, you can request it, but then we're going to have a list of approvers. And we'll keep talking to see if we can get this page to load in time. Another thing that you can say is you can have a maximum amount of time this can be active for any user in your organization. It goes as low as 1 hour. I want to say it goes up to 12 hours inside the portal. Another thing is you can have additional challenges. These additional challenges are around ticket system name, ticket system number, and verification steps. Meaning that you can type anything you want in. You can say Billy Joe Bob's ticket system 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 because I said so for the justification, and it'll take it. But if anyone comes back later, they're going to look at this and say, okay, what were you really doing here? Were you adding users? Were you assigned a ticket in the organization? And we're going to try that again. Hey, turn it off and on again. Right here is another step that if you don't have multi-factor authentication in all areas, or if you have a policy where once they're logged in for 90 days, you can force them to do multi-factor authentication again in order to access this, which might be a good idea to challenge they are who they say they are. And right here we can see the require justifications in tickets. Again, these are not validated fields, so you can put anything you want here. But I like having a requirement on the requester and the approver for justification, because that means there's 2 people in your organizations that filled out faulty information if something was approved, saying, yes, I have validated this is correct, and 2 people accountable for that type of action. Then you can change the different types of assignments, and this is where you do the justification and activation. So this requires me as the approver to say, yes, this person should have this access, they put in the right ticket number, I validated they're adding users, everything is good. Let's take a look at this from the other side. And if you notice here, inside of the office, well, I guess maybe in the first 2 to 3 rows you can notice here, they don't have any type of administrative access because they don't have the little gear here that says admin from this portal. If you don't have this gear here, it means you don't have admin access. But you can navigate to the Entra ID portal. And from the Entra ID portal, you should be able to request from the Privilege Identity Management side, maybe. and the just-in-time access, and I can see that I have the user administrator role that I can hit active on. And I can activate for a specific period of time, or I can activate right away. And sometimes this portal does not like when it's already been loaded. So we'll try that again. There we go. And this custom time could be, I've only granted any user to have 1 hour of working time with this administrative access. So I can say, I'm gonna go to lunch and come back. It's gonna be active for 1 to 2. That's what this is good for. And as you can see, the ticket number, the ticket system, and even the reasons can be whatever you want them to be, but this is going to show up to the approver side that we'll see here. And we can come back to the roles. We'll just close out of this and come back over into it. And this is why I like saving stuff that I use the most often under favorites, because going under each of those individual tiles, I can never remember what the actual name of those are supposed to be. So I can check out my request. Maybe. And we should see it almost populate immediately, and we do here. Try to give us a little more real estate. And we can see that they said because reasons, my ticket number is this, and then it's just simply saying, okay, this user can be approved or they're gonna be denied. I have to put some type of justification here because I've required a justification, but again, I can put whatever I want in this justification field without validation. But now I'm saying what they said is cool, and they got the access based off of me saying that was cool, which is an accountability chain. Once that happens, you may have to log out and log back in or clear cache from the other user, but then they should almost immediately be able to log into the administrative portal from their side and do whatever job. We're gonna move on to the conditional access side. I like this meme because it very clearly defines what can happen if you select all users in your organization. You can lock yourself out. Almost every room I've been in, someone just shakily raises their hand, yes, I've locked out my entire organization, and it's a very awkward call with Microsoft. I recommend excluding at least your break glass account from here or putting it in review only mode. Review only mode I recommend having for at least 90 days because there's usually something within a 90-day quarter that happens at least once, which will give you a good idea. If you can do it for longer, fantastic, but know you can and will lock yourself out of your organization. And we'll head over to conditional access here. I also really hate this new portal because it opens up all the blades on top of each other instead of just like navigating to the next pane, which is quite a pain. So we'll come over to conditional access. Conditional access has actually been getting some love lately. They, about a year and a half ago, reinitiated the idea of being able to use templates. The templates are like the main things that you might activate as an administrator, but we're going to go to creating a new policy, and you can name this policy whatever you want, and then you get to add your users. If you select all users, you're going to get a message saying you're going to lock yourself out, or you have the potential to lock yourself out of your organization. By default, the enable is report only, so it gives you a little bit of breathing room there, so you're not automatically doing that. But if you're able to select a certain group of users, I would go ahead and do that. I like the targeted resources, so it's not just all-encompassing. Maybe you have some higher priority things in your organization, like your intranet might be SharePoint. So you may scope this down to just accessing SharePoint. If you use enterprise applications for authentication to any third-party application, you can also target that third-party application authentication app inside of Entra and say, just that app. And in this case, I have an app, or you can do a group of apps if you create a filter. Let's see if we can find Salty. Popped right up. This is an authentication application I have configured for one of the software portals I have for Veeam. And this is for restores. That means anytime this application is prompted for an authorization, it'll automatically take me through these extra steps in order to I am who I say I am, and it could be stronger forms of authentication. You have regular multi-factor authentication for grant, then you have strength multi-factor authentication for grant, which will get rid of like the text messages and calling. You'll be forced to either use the little dongle you have or something else. Then you have your group of conditions. If you leave conditions blank, that means it's all inclusive. Everything will be included no matter how you log in, and it could be, I want to do this only when you're not in the office. Maybe I want to do this always. That can be configured here. As well as all of the other, I don't want to allow jailbroken phones on here. I don't want to allow certain operating systems. Maybe we are a Windows-only shop for laptops. You should not be logging in from a Mac or some distro of Linux. That can be controlled within here. Maybe you have managed devices through Intune. If you have all of your devices in Intune, you can make it so only Intune access devices and enabled devices that fall within compliance, meaning you're doing your updates and everything is kosher on a VPN level, then you can access this internal site. There's layers. And then the granting gets a little bit more flexible. So you can say block if they meet these conditions, or you can say grant conditionally based off of these other conditions. And that's where we get the multi-factor authentication, which is just prompting you again to do multi-factor authentication, or you can do your multi-factor authentication strength. This requires you to do those higher strength authentications that are more pervious to like the simulated attacks. You can also make sure your device is compliant in the system, or require them to change their password. They do risky behavior, they have to reset their password. To get a spontaneous ticket saying, hey, I have to reset my password like every 5 days. Why am I having to do this? It's at least letting you know either they're doing risky behavior or their account's been compromised and you need to check that out because they're not doing it, but an attacker might be doing it. Any questions about this so far? Okay, it's a lot. So security defaults are sort of becoming a thing of the past because this is the thing that you start doing before you start implementing the conditional access in your organization. But they can allow and block certain kinds of protocols. Really, with the new thing Microsoft signed, this might become less and less pertinent. But you also have to think about, what is my acceptable risk level? With acceptable risk, it's unique to every organization. It comes down to cost. It comes down to being able to do something. My favorite example is around education. So who here has kids? Who here has a kid that could keep a flash drive for an entire year without losing it? Yeah, maybe one. So imagine an entire school trying to keep something to do multi-factor authentication, or you happen to go to the parents saying, hey, you have to buy your kid a phone that's capable of multi-factor authentication. That's a hard conversation to have. So multi-factor authentication has been a hard thing to implement in these environments. And that has to be an acceptable risk in some cases. And now insurance companies are coming in saying, hey, that's nice, but figure it out. And that's summarizing that section. We have some on BYOD, and we'll coast over some of this and get into the security and compliance portals as they come through. But BYOD can be also managed with a mobile app management process. My company went in to do a mobile app management process, and I end up using one of my old phones so that I can access my company's apps because I have a personal Microsoft 365 account. If you have another organization side by side inside the apps on any device, you're going to be an overarching policy if someone asks you to say, hey, we want to manage this application. That didn't make me comfortable. Now, if you don't have a personal Microsoft 365 account, there's going to be no real overlay between the applications on your phone and any other applications, other than you may have a data loss policy where you can't copy out and back in. Fun fact is, if you have a data loss policy in place from your organization, you cannot copy from OneDrive to Exchange, even on your phone. So it kind of gives you some limited access and something to consider if that's something you have to do quite often. Talking to your admin team, being like, hey, can I have some type of exception? Covered the data loss policies. This one has the demo on the portal that I gave you access to, but creating secure email flows and data loss policies are on there. Fun fact is if you do end up managing devices from a device level, you can store your BitLocker keys inside of Entra ID. If you've ever lost a BitLocker key, me included, this is a great way to make sure they're all in one place, they're somewhere secure, and even if your admin leaves, you're still able to pull back and get those devices. Since data is the lifeblood of organization, there are consequences to not protecting this data. And there's some really great numbers here, but one of my favorite numbers is actually in the screenshot, not inside of the numbers the product marketing guy pulled out. It's actually a change in senior leadership from 2020 to 2022 of about 50% for change in senior leadership as due to a consequence of an attack. 1 in 10 organizations have a change in senior leadership, meaning not you. Your boss had to leave the company because there was an attack. If you find something and you want to make sure you're not going to be held accountable and walked out the door if you get attacked and you know something's a problem, continue sending those emails. Because that accountability trail, I can tell you, has saved countless jobs from people I know directly in the community being like, I told you we were going to have a problem if we didn't fix this. And that helps. And we'll get right into the security and compliance side. These are now the Microsoft 365 Defender and the Microsoft Purview. I actually had the pleasure of talking with someone from Microsoft. And we all know Purview means something's coming, changing, it's not going to quite be there. Actually, this is the name of the portal. They're not changing it. This is Microsoft 365 Purview. Have fun. Love Microsoft naming conventions. So we'll start off in the Defender side, which is the security side of the portal. One of the things I like to point out is look at your secure score. Not everything in this list is going to apply to you. But if you're not sure where to even start or where to start in this conversation, if you check out your secure score, you can get information for certain things that might be more impactful based off of other organizations having had an impact by that type of an event. So we can see here that score, and then we scroll down and it says to address, if they're been assigned to someone, you'll start to see these risks coming out. And if you decide to accept the risk, you even have a checkbox to say, hey, I recognize this could be a problem, but we're not gonna worry about this right now. And it puts your score up. That way you can see when changes are happening. Okay, then I can address this, or new things have been added. Another thing I like that you can do is right down here under the email and collaboration is you can send out simulated phishing attacks directly from Microsoft. My company did this, and I happened to be sitting in the office that day. I'm not often in the office, but I just happened to be in the office, and I got this email saying, hey, your account's being removed from Microsoft. If this was something legitimate, click, or if this was by mistake, click here. Back in my head is my boss is on vacation right now. Did I just get fired? Because looks like a Microsoft email coming through. I just picked up my laptop, walked down to IT, and was like, please tell me this is phishing. And they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, I get that this is how we train our users, but these get really scary. I was concerned I lost my job, and I'm pretty good at picking up on different kinds of phishing attacks. If you think you're impervious, one of my favorite podcasts to look at is What Kind of Idiot Gets Phished? They get permission to phish their organization. They go through multi-factor authentication in this phishing attack. And they even have people that come back for a second episode saying, hey, now that we had this, we just want to come back and talk about it. Do you think you've been cognizant and not been phished again? They had been phished again by their internal IT department and got caught. But there's all kinds of templates in here that you can also pick up on. Some of them are from FedEx. Some of them look like they're from Chase Bank. But they look very legitimate, and they usually pass the trusted sender side, which gives you another level of, oh, something's not quite right here. Now we'll hop over to Purview. Now Purview has a new portal. And if you notice, I'm not in the new portal. The new portal is slow, it is clunky, and I can't find anything on it when I want it. You can't really pin things in the same way. But the biggest thing that I use in here, again, is the score. And I mind you to be gentle, these are all lab environments. I promise you, it's only my group of people on my team that all insist that they have to be administrators. And we also do backup, which means we simulate ransomware attacks so that we can show what it looks like when it happens in your data. And this one's going to be a little different for the score. This is going to be more about, okay, I need to set up self-password resets. If you're in an organization with an IT department that's kind of already running pretty lean, this would be a good way to then get some more cycles back for yourself. And it's one of the first things that it recommends here. Something that I use quite a bit, considering I have a lot of admins in my environment, is sometimes I'll get email notifications saying, hey, license count has changed in your organization. I'm like, cool. Well, it doesn't tell me if I've added or removed in that email. All it says is, you've had a change. I'll come in here, do a complete search for added or removed users, added or removed license, and I can immediately tell it's my boss doing it. He's testing out our user delete and restore for Entra ID. Like, cool. Could have let me know, but that's fine. And then I could also track all of the micro changes that the Entra ID product did on the background, which was kind of a cool audit trail. This is the only way I have visibility in some cases to see what is happening in those cases. If you ever have to do a search for data inside the Microsoft environment across your OneDrive, your SharePoint, or your Exchange, you can do that here from the content search. Content search is like a watered down version of eDiscovery. Meaning it's not going to be as granular, it's not going to be in depth in tags, and you can't create and build out entire policies. But to learn to do eDiscovery, you're going to watch 12 hours of YouTube videos. To do context search, you're going to be able to probably pick this up as a general IT person in about 20 minutes and be like, I think it's running, I'm going to come back after it's finished. And just to take a look so you guys can see how awful this new portal is, because I absolutely loathe this new portal, is we're already inside of here, but from home, this is what you see. And these are the individual entities that you can click on in each of the solutions. And I feel like it's a little harder to find the things that you need because visually they're not in a place that you remember they are. That's how I work is, okay, I know it's 3 down, and I know if I open that one, it's 3 more down, and now it's like, okay, where do I find this? And again, there are some demos. I need a new Purview demo. There's the analytic, or advanced threat analytics. This one is not to be confused with the one inside of the compliance portal. This one is an on-premises version where you can actually see the connections between your networks with the Microsoft backing. Sentinel is also pretty cool. If you have a company that's willing to shell out the money for Sentinel, I highly recommend it. You'll pay more for the storage of the logs than you will for the Sentinel license itself. Additionally, if you're the type of company that has the money to pay for that, I would also recommend the Copilot security. It'll tap into the Sentinel environment, and you can actually ask it questions like, where should I be concerned about today to go look at this IP address? Or I saw this really weird IP address come up. Can you trace where else in my environment this has been? And yes, it's a pricey tool, but it is really cool if you get the chance to play with it. And that's really the walk-away points from this presentation. If you want the link to this presentation as well as other presentations, all of my socials, some of the blog posts that I've done, they're all on this one link to rule them all. Once the phones go down, I have one more link for you guys. I sit on a couple of boards for Microsoft 365 user groups, and one of them that we're doing is a global user group. And this global user group is a low-code, no-code event. It's 24 hours, and the ticket's completely free, and it's all donated towards UNICEF. You can sign up, you can join it. We'll have recordings of all these videos afterwards, and it'll be experts in the community like me, Microsoft employees, and really big Microsoft MVP hitters. And low code, no code means there's probably something for everyone. But I've been pitching this on the board, and it's all for charity. You actually donate directly to the charity. You do not donate anything to us whatsoever. Now, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me today, and I think I went directly on the 50-minute mark, so thank you.
See you then.